CBS News political director Fin Gómez joins us now from Miami in the Spin Room post-debate. Fin, your impressions and what people are saying there in the ever-truthful Spin Room.
Yeah, the ever-truthful Spin Room. We've already seen a bunch of surrogates, and Vivek Ramaswamy is right here, right next to me. But the big dynamic here that everyone is talking about is the back and forth between Nikki Haley and Governor Ron DeSantis. Really, those two vying essentially for that number 2 slot, if you will. In recent polling, we've seen that they have essentially been even in second place, a distant second place to Donald Trump. But still, you saw a lot of back and forth between those two. And also between Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, and Nikki Haley over that TikTok incident, if you will, about them using that social media platform. I did ask Vivek Ramaswamy what he felt about being called a scum by Nikki Haley after he referenced that her own daughter used the TikTok platform, and he basically said that people shouldn't be criticized for using or campaigning on TikTok, on that social media platform, as he does. But didn't really answer directly why he referenced her. But a lot of drama here in the Spin Room here, Major.
So one thing that is always true in a Spin Room, there are no losers in any Spin Room, Republican or Democratic. That's why I called it the truthful place. Fin, the dynamics of this race, according to our esteemed panel, who I'll get back to here at the table in a few moments, was that nothing really moved tonight. The needle, metaphorically, didn't move. And whatever competition occurred on that stage was essentially a competition for second place, but as you said, a remaining distant second from the current frontrunner, former President Trump. Is there any sentiment in that Spin Room that dynamic, which has been in existence for months now, has been in any way altered?
I think we need to talk about the issues I talked about on that stage.
In a word, no. No. That dynamic has not shifted. The sense is that dynamic has not shifted or changed after tonight's debate. I think if you took the next few surveys that we may see, I'd be surprised if there'd be a major shift in the current trajectory of this race. And I think that's a sense that we at least hear in this Spin Room tonight.
And you spend a fair amount of time, Fin, talking to those in the Trump inner circle. They know this, do they not? And they do find justification in this strategy of not attending. True?
And I think, again, it's going to take a different...
Yeah, absolutely. I've asked them directly, why not attend? Why not, your boss likes to get in front of a camera, frankly, and speak to millions. Doesn't want to speak to his supporters, and they frankly say over and over and over again that it's not worth the political risk. They've calculated it. He's so far ahead that by him coming to these debates, by him mixing it up with the rivals who are frankly so far behind him in the recent polling, that it's not worth the political risk to do that, to engage at this level. I have heard from senior Trump officials who told me that they're not going to play prevent defense either. They're not going to take this for granted. They do feel confident about the trajectory, but I do not expect any change in the upcoming debates of having the former president attend.
CBS News political director Fin Gómez, thank you so much. I mentioned them a second ago. Let's bring back our political panel. My anchor buddies here at the table, Ashley Etienne, Devin O'Malley. Devin, is this ultimately, though it frustrates the Republicans on stage, smarter than not for the former president not to be there?
If you're former President Trump, I don't know why you would be up on that stage. I think at least 4 people would probably be slinging arrows your way and would be exposing a lot of your vulnerabilities and weaknesses and putting you in a tough position to explain some of the changes that he's gone in just the last couple of years on policy. I think this is a former president who campaigned as a conservative, who, with Mike Pence by his side, governed as a conservative, but has abandoned those conservative policies and adopted a campaign of grievance and has begun to talk about, he's abandoned the issue of life, as we talked about earlier. He wants to talk about essentially a 10% tax on all Americans by imposing tariffs on goods coming into the country. I mean, these are a complete
And using
abandonment.
words like retribution.
Yeah, and so
And getting rid of the Constitution. I mean, a whole lot of it.
chief among
And Ashley,
let's
as someone
start
who
there.
views this from a Democratic lens and an avid supporter of President Biden's reelection campaign, are you happy he's not debating? Do you want him to be off stage and soft in case there are debates in a general election?
You mean Donald Trump?
Yes.
No, I want Donald Trump to be debating with the other Republican
Okay.
candidates because I agree with Will Hurd that the American people deserve to hear from him. I mean, especially in this moment. I just wanted to say, though, I just got some talking points from the Democratic Party, and their sort of lines coming out of the debate was last night MAGA Republicans lost. They're double down on that losing agenda tonight in the debate. And I think that that's absolutely true. But I think to your question about Donald Trump being there, no doubt. And I think he's obviously afraid. He's obviously got something to hide.
But is there something shrewd and calculating that's working for him in the present? Not being there and not going to these debates?
100%. No doubt. I mean, I think it's a smart strategy on his part. Don't laugh at that. I think it's a smart strategy on his part. But again, I mean, you know, and I know you sort of identified me as a strong Biden supporter and as a Democrat, but first I'm an American citizen. And I want to hear from anybody who wants to be the president. I think they should be held to account. They should be asked tough questions. They should be able to answer them. And he's got an entire record he needs to answer for. Not just saying that he wants to abolish the Constitution, but you know, his abysmal record on COVID, from COVID to, you know, January 6th, to attempts to overturn the election. I mean, there's so much that the American people deserve to hear from Donald Trump about that we're not actually challenging him on. So I just think it's despicable that he doesn't show up. I also think it's more despicable that the Republicans didn't raise his name, his record more frequently in this debate. It was a missed opportunity. How do you beat someone if you're not going to take them on directly? That doesn't happen in politics.
I thought it was especially notable when the debate opened up and Vivek did this monologue about how he's sick of being a loser and how we, as Republicans, lost last night.
Culture of losing.
A culture of losing. Lost last night, lost in 2022, lost in 2020. And yet doesn't name former President.
Let's go back to 18. You've been losing since Donald Trump showed up, honestly.
But doesn't invoke former President Trump's name.
But doesn't.
Exactly.
And he's
Precisely.
As having anything, even tangentially, to do with that. Ashley, Etienne, Devin O'Malley, thank you so very much.